Materia Turai.
Chair. In 2010, when I first became co-leader, just in mid-2009, 2010 is one of my second major speeches. I announced the Green Party commitment to a capital gains tax excluding the family home. And that came after reviewing work that had been first started by Rod Donald, actually, when he was here, that even in those early days, when the Greens were looking at the best kind of tax regime to help both provide income to the country as a whole, to build a fair tax system on which all New Zealanders could rely, and which again would help manage speculation in the housing market. When Rod Donald did it, it was for those reasons. When I proposed it in 2010, it was for those reasons. And here we are again, having an opportunity to put in place a more comprehensive version of the capital gains tax than is currently in the law. Because, of course, the Bright Line test is essentially a capital gains tax, but National don't want to say it. And that's, we all know why that is. Yeah, shh, don't tell anybody. But which is also why, unfortunately, it is so weak. And so the Green Party is very pleased to support this provision, which will extend the Bright Line test, capital gains tax, to 5 years from 2 years. And so this is critical. It is a critical tool in the cooling of the housing market. Now, we all know that we have to use every possible tool available to us to deal with the housing crisis. We also know that a capital gains tax will have a different kind of effect over time once properly introduced. So it has a proper one, a good one, will provide almost instantaneous cooling of the growth in house prices and in the housing market in the short term. And that's a good thing. That then helps provide more fertile ground for some of the other tax changes that need to come into place to have a longer term effect. On top of that, you're also building more homes, like we discussed in Part 4 of this bill, around the 10,000 homes a year, also building more homes and bringing them online. So there are a whole range of steps that need to be taken, of which a proper capital gains tax, excluding the family home, is a critical part. So I'm very pleased to have an opportunity to discuss it again, and perhaps even to improve the Bright Line capital gains tax test that is in the current law. So this is critical when we see the data that's coming out about speculation in the housing market. So investors make up around 45% of sales, house sales nationwide. Now, there's a little bit of flexibility in that number month to month, but nonetheless they are a significant part of the market across the country. In Auckland, it's about 50% of the housing market is invested, and they are driving ordinary people who are just moving from house to house, as a natural part of the transition of their life, and first home buyers out of the housing market. In the 80s and the 90s, it was never this high. The proportion was never this high of investors. And the reason why it's so high today is because we have a tax system that provides huge opportunities to investors, and by taking those opportunities away from ordinary New Zealand families. So we have an obligation in the government and in the parliament to manage our tax laws effectively so that they provide a fairer approach, so that we get the right benefit in the right places. That is what good governance is all about, sir. We know that mortgage lending now is well over $200 billion. Now, that is the highest it's been since May of 2008. Now, those of us who were around in May of 2008 know that that was just before the global financial crisis hit. So we have not had the high rate of borrowing for mortgages in this country as high as this since just before the global financial crisis. Now, we cannot continue to allow investors and speculators to dominate in the housing market, not only locking out other homeowners and young families, but actually putting the entire economy at risk. And more economists are saying that the speculation in the housing market is putting the entire economy at risk, not just those in the housing market. So we need to keep changing, looking and reviewing, making changes to tax law and regulation to make sure we have got the settings right to promote the best possible housing opportunities for everyone. And that does include, to some extent, Mr Chair.
Point of order has been called. The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, I draw your attention to Standing Order 3023 and ask that you rule this SOP out and end the debate on it forthwith on the basis that it is outside the scope of the bill. Now, I understand that this is an omnibus bill and that there are parts to it that are quite disparate, and therefore the scope of debate and SOPs that can be tabled will be necessarily broad. But this is an amendment effectively to a tax measure, a revenue measure. Now, it has been suggested to me that the reason this could be in scope is because the intention of that measure is to improve the affordability of housing. But I have checked very carefully, and in the time available, cannot find any reference to the fact that the Bright Line legislation, when introduced, I think in about May 2015 and then passed into law, had any reference to affordability as that bill's goal. The goal of that bill was to ensure that the right amount of tax was paid in the right circumstances. And on that basis, I would suggest to you very strongly that this debate is completely out of scope with the bill that we're considering in committee.
Point of order, Mr Chairman.
Chris Hipkins.
Mr Chairman, the standing order that the Minister just quoted, 3023, refers to local and private bills. It does not apply to government bills.
The Honourable Mike Woodhouse.
I would beg the committee's indulgence in that, and without wanting to throw the clerk's office under a bus, it was that was the reference that I had. But I know, as the member does, who raises a sage point, that the standing orders are very clear about what the committee can and can't debate, and the amendments, which any member of the House is able to raise, needs to be in scope.
Speaking further to that, Mr Speaker.
Chris Hipkins.
Mr Speaker, the point of order that the member has made, he may have another standing order he wishes to rely on. That standing order he quoted does not relate to this bill. So we're happy to continue the debate while he does a bit more homework if he wants to.
Members, consider the points of orders raised by the Honourable Michael Woodhouse and those in reply by Chris Hipkins. My view is that it does appear to me. I've also taken some advice from the clerk's office. It does appear to me that the intention of the Bright Line test is to stop the turnover of houses so quickly, and so would maintain a level of a control on housing prices. I'm prepared to allow the debate to continue at the moment and rule that is in scope. But I do have alongside that a parallel issue to raise with the House, and that is that the scope of this particular part, as introduced, is very narrow. And so I'm not going to allow members to carry on effectively just rephrasing the contributions of other members. I can't see this debate on this part lasting very long at all. Point of order, the Honourable Mike Woodhouse.
Firstly, I would like to make a clarification and apology to the clerk's office. Actually, the reference to Standing Order 3023 was mine. The correct standing order is 302(2). While I'm on my feet, Mr Chairman, can I just seek a clarification that your ruling then means that it's your considered opinion that the purpose of the Bright Line test legislation was indeed around housing affordability, and therefore the SOP is within scope?
Knowing that wasn't a challenge to the ruling but seeking clarification, my ruling is that that the amendments are relevant to the subject matter of the bill and consistent with the principles and the objects of the bill. Madam David.